So there I was, Jean, just your average Joe, gearing up for what should have been the highlight reel of my life, my wedding. Picture this small, sleepy town where the biggest event is the annual bake sale, and now, my wedding's the talk of the town. Everything was set, from the flowers to the guest list. Then, boom, 1 month out, and my world got flipped on its head. I'm not much of a tech whiz, but I had recently rigged up some security cameras around my place, just to keep an eye on things. Never, in my wildest dreams, did I think they'd catch something like this. One evening, I'm sitting there, scrolling through the footage, and what do I see? Claire, my Claire, with some other guy. I mean, it was like a punch to the gut, seeing them there, in our home. Man, my mind was racing. Anger, shock, disbelief, you name it, I felt it. But then, this weird calm settled over me. I thought, okay, Jean, you've got 2 choices here. Confront her and watch your fairy tale wedding go up in flames, or play the long game. So, I chose the latter. I decided to keep it all under wraps, act like Mr. Oblivious. Trust me, it wasn't easy smiling at Claire, discussing wedding plans when all I could see was that betrayal. Every day was like walking on a tightrope. I had to keep my cool, go through the motions of the excited groom-to-be. Cake tasting, sure, finalizing the guest list, absolutely. All the while, this secret was burning a hole in my pocket. You see, I had a plan. It wasn't just about calling off the wedding, it was about exposing the truth, letting everyone see Claire for who she really was. But to pull this off, I needed my inner circle. My best mates, the guys who were supposed to stand with me at the altar, they had to know. So, I spilled everything, showed them the footage. You should have seen their faces, it was a mix of horror and, we've got your back, man. As the days ticked by, I put on the performance of a lifetime, pretending everything was hunky-dory. Claire, none the wiser, was wrapped up in the wedding fever. Little did she know, her perfect day was about to turn into a nightmare. It was a waiting game, a countdown to the moment when I'd drop the bomb and watch her world crumble like mine did. And let me tell you, those days leading up to the wedding, they were the longest of my life. Every hug from Claire, every kiss, felt like a betrayal. But I had to see this through. For my sake, for the sake of truth. So, there I was, a month out from D-Day, juggling the weight of this secret and the facade of the happy fiancé. But inside, I was a storm, waiting to unleash. Man, that month was something else. By day, I was the picture-perfect fiancé, all smiles and nods, discussing flower arrangements and reception menus with Claire. I played my part well, even surprised myself a bit. I'd look into her eyes, those same eyes that once spelled love, now a reminder of deception, and I'd pretend. Pretend that the world was all roses and champagne. But when night fell, it was a whole different ballgame. I'd retreat into my own world, my mind a battlefield of strategies and plans. It was like leading a double life. The gears in my head were constantly turning, plotting the big reveal. It wasn't just about confronting Claire. It was about exposing her in front of everyone who mattered, our families, our friends, the whole darn town if it came down to it. Now, I wasn't going to go down this road alone. I needed my squad, my groomsmen, the guys who had been with me through thick and thin. So, I called them up, one by one, and let them in on the secret. Showed them the footage. Man, you should have seen their reactions, it was a mix of anger, shock, and this fierce loyalty. They were on board from the get-go, ready to back me up. We spent nights huddled in my living room, whispering like conspirators, mapping out every detail. We planned it down to the second, the timing, the words, the aftermath. I had to think of everything. What if Claire denied it? What if she made a scene? The scenarios played out in my head over and over. My buddies were my sounding board, throwing in ideas, thinking 2 steps ahead. They were my rock in this whole crazy scheme. Days turned into weeks, and the facade of the doting fiancé was wearing me thin. Smiling at Claire, holding her hand, it was like a performance on repeat. But every smile, every touch, was laced with the truth I was holding back. The irony was bitter, planning a wedding while planning its downfall. And the closer we got to the wedding, the more surreal it all felt. I was living in this bizarre limbo, counting down the days not to a marriage but to a reckoning. It was like watching a play where you know the final act is going to shock the audience, but you just keep rehearsing your lines, waiting for the curtain call. Through it all, I kept up appearances. I had to. There was no room for slip-ups, no chance to let my guard down. Claire was oblivious, caught up in the bridal buzz, while I was orchestrating the endgame. It was a twisted game of chess, and I was maneuvering for that final checkmate. So, yeah, that month was a whirlwind, a mix of wedding plans and revenge plots. The double life was exhausting, but there was a strange thrill to it. I was the puppeteer in this grand scheme, pulling the strings, waiting for the moment to cut them loose. And as the big day drew near, I knew one thing for sure. This wedding was going to be unforgettable. So, the big day finally rolls around. Let me paint you a picture. The sun's shining, there's this gentle breeze blowing, and the chapel's filled to the brim with family, friends, and folks from around town. Everyone's buzzing with excitement, the air's practically sparkling with that wedding day magic. Claire, man, she looked stunning, like she stepped right out of a bridal magazine. Everything, and I mean everything, was picture perfect. But, deep down, I knew this was no fairy tale ending. The ceremony kicks off, and we're going through the motions. I'm standing there at the altar, trying my best to keep my game face on. We're doing the vows, the rings, all that jazz. Then, the moment of truth. The priest asks the golden question: if anyone objects to this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. That's my cue. I step forward, mic in hand, and there's this hush over the crowd. I start off with the usual, thanking everyone for coming, talking about love and togetherness. You know, the kind of stuff you'd expect in a wedding speech. But then, my tone shifts. I turn to Claire, and I can see it in her eyes, she knows something's up. And then, I just let it rip. There's something you all should know, I say. The room's dead silent, you could hear a pin drop. I give my best man the nod, and he hits play on the projector. Dear readers, I hope you're as hooked on this journey as I was living it. Before we dive into the next chapter of this roller coaster story, I've got a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying this tale of love, adventure, and unexpected twists, how about showing some love? Hit that like button to let me know you're on board. It's a simple click for you, but it means the world to me. It's like a virtual high five, telling me to keep the stories coming. And hey, why stop there? Go ahead and hit subscribe too. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming up next. Subscribing will keep you in the loop, so you're always the first to know when a new chapter drops. Plus, it's a great way to support this storyteller on his quest to keep you entertained. So, take a quick second to like and subscribe. Done? Awesome. Now, buckle up and let's jump back into the story. The next chapter's waiting, and trust me, you don't want to miss a beat of what's coming up next. So, there we were, in the middle of what should have been the happiest day of my life, and boom, the giant screen lights up behind us. It was like a scene straight out of a movie, except this was real life, my life, playing out for all to see. The footage rolls, and there's Claire right there on the big screen, but not in her wedding dress. No, she's opening our front door to some guy, and it's definitely not me. The whole room goes dead silent. You could literally feel the shockwave rip through the crowd. People's faces, they were a picture. A mix of disbelief, confusion, and yeah, some gossip-hungry excitement too. And Claire, she's standing there, frozen. I mean, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, the whole deal. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the screen, and neither could anyone else. The video kept playing, each second a nail in the coffin of what was supposed to be our marriage. You could see Claire and this guy, laughing, cozying up. It was all there, clear as day. I watched the crowd watching the screen, saw the realization dawn on their faces. This wasn't just some pre-wedding jitters or cold feet, this was real, raw betrayal. Then the murmurs started, quiet at first, then growing louder. It was like the room was coming to life, reacting to the bombshell I just dropped. People were whispering, pointing, some even looking at me with this mix of sympathy and respect. I guess they figured it took guts to do what I did. Claire finally managed to look away from the screen, her eyes darting around the room, probably looking for some kind of escape. But there was none, the truth was out, and there was no taking it back. She looked at me, and for a moment our eyes locked. I saw a lot of things in those eyes, shock, shame, maybe even a little bit of fear. But there wasn't any love, not anymore. The video ended, and the screen went dark, but the damage was done. The silence was replaced by a cacophony of voices, everyone trying to make sense of what they'd just seen. Claire was standing there, looking like she wanted the ground to swallow her up. I don't think she'd ever imagined her wedding day would turn into her public unmasking. I didn't stick around for the aftermath. I walked out of that chapel with my head held high, my groomsmen at my side. Behind me, I could hear the chaos starting, the whispers turning into a storm. But I didn't look back. That chapter of my life was over. Outside, the sun was still shining, but everything felt different. It was like waking up from a long, twisted dream. I felt this weight lift off me, a mix of relief and emptiness. But there was also this sense of closure. I'd exposed the truth, shattered the illusion of the perfect wedding, the perfect life. So, there I was, walking out of the church, my buddies and family trailing behind me. The air was thick with all sorts of emotions, shock, relief, even a bit of pride. Stepping out into the sunlight, it felt like I was leaving a whole different world behind. Inside, Claire was facing the music, her perfect wedding turned into her worst nightmare. I didn't look back, not even once. I could feel the weight of the stairs, hear the muffled conversations spilling out the church doors, but I kept walking. My mind was a whirlwind, but there was also this weird sense of calm. I'd done it, exposed the truth, put an end to the lies. It was like shedding a skin, leaving the old, betrayed me behind in that church. Behind me, I heard Claire. She was pleading, her voice breaking through the chatter and confusion. She was calling out to me, trying to say sorry, trying to explain. But it was too late for that. Too late for apologies, for explanations. The Claire I'd loved, the one I'd planned to spend my life with, she was just a memory now, a ghost in my past. I kept walking, the sounds of the wedding turned spectacle fading with each step. My friends were patting me on the back, mumbling words of support. My family, they were a mix of emotions, sad for me, but also proud that I'd stood up for myself. It was a strange moment, saying goodbye to a chapter of my life in such a dramatic fashion. The further I walked, the lighter I felt. It wasn't happiness, not really. It was more like freedom, like I'd been carrying this huge burden and now it was gone. I'd been living in this bubble of deceit, and now it had burst, leaving me out in the open, raw but real. I didn't have a plan, no idea where I was going from here. All I knew was that I needed to get away, to put some distance between me and the ruins of my almost wedding. The future was a big, blank canvas, but that was okay. It was better than a future built on lies. As we walked away from the church, the sounds of Claire's pleas finally disappeared. It was done. She was part of my past now, a chapter closed. Ahead of me, the road was open, leading to new beginnings, new possibilities. It was a tough way to learn a lesson, but it was one I'd never forget. Trust, once broken, couldn't be mended, not really. I'd walked into that church as one man, and walked out as another. A man freed from a web of lies, ready to start over, to rebuild on a foundation of truth. So, there I was, walking away from what should have been my wedding, but instead was my liberation. It was a bitter end to a sweet dream, but sometimes, that's just how life goes. You play the cards you're dealt, and sometimes, you have to call a bluff. That day, I'd called the biggest bluff of all, and in doing so, found a new kind of strength. And as for Claire, well, she'd have to live with her choices, just like I'd have to live with mine. But at that moment, walking away, I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about me, about what came next. It was a blank page, and I was ready to start writing a new story. A month of pain and deceit had turned into a moment of liberation for me. Walking away from that church, from Claire, felt like shedding a heavy coat I'd been wearing for too long. It was over, the lies, the betrayal, all of it. I was free, and man, did that feel good. As for Claire, she was left to deal with the fallout. I heard she tried to reach out, sent messages, left voicemails. She was saying it was a moment of weakness, a mistake, and that she'd do anything to fix it. But for me, it was too little, too late. There was no going back from something like that. She'd crossed a line, and there was no erasing it. I'd spent a month living a lie, smiling through the pain, pretending everything was fine. But now, I didn't have to pretend anymore. I could be honest, with myself and with everyone else. It was like I could breathe again, really breathe, without that weight pressing down on my chest. Claire's pleas for forgiveness, her promises to change, they didn't mean much to me anymore. It wasn't just about her cheating. It was about the trust that had been broken, shattered into a million pieces. You can't just pick those pieces up and put them back together. Some things, once broken, stay broken. I started looking forward, thinking about what was next for me. The future was a blank slate, and that was exciting. I could do anything, be anyone. I wasn't tied down by Claire's expectations or our shared plans. It was just me, on my own, and that was okay. I spent time with friends, reconnected with people I'd lost touch with. I picked up old hobbies, tried new things. It was like rediscovering parts of myself that I'd forgotten about, parts that had been buried under the relationship. And yeah, there were moments when I'd think about Claire, about what could have been. But those moments were fleeting, like shadows passing by. I was too focused on moving forward, on building a new life for myself. People would ask me about her, about what happened. I'd just shrug and say it was a part of my past. I didn't want to dwell on it, didn't want to give it more power than it deserved. It was a chapter in my life, sure, but it was a chapter that had ended. As for Claire, I heard she was struggling, trying to make sense of everything. But that wasn't my problem anymore. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I had my own path to follow, my own choices to make. In the end, it was about more than just getting over a broken relationship. It was about finding myself again, about learning what I really wanted out of life. It was a journey, and I was just getting started. So, there I was, a month out from the biggest betrayal of my life, feeling more alive than I'd felt in years. It was a strange feeling, like I'd been asleep and was finally waking up. I was ready for whatever came next, ready to face the world on my own terms. And that's exactly what I did. I moved forward, one step at a time, into a future that was mine and mine alone. It was a future without Claire, without the lies and the pain. It was just me, and that was enough. And that, folks, is where my tale winds down. After all the drama, the heartache, and the big reveal, life sorta just rolled on. It's funny, you know, how things turn out. One day you're planning a wedding, thinking you've got it all figured out, and the next, you're flying solo, charting a course through uncharted waters. Claire, well, she became a part of my history, a lesson learned, a story to tell. I hope she found her peace, figured out her own stuff. As for me, I was back to square one, but it wasn't all bad. Starting over had its perks. I rediscovered old joys, explored new passions, and reconnected with myself. It's like I got a second shot at being, well, me. Sure, there were moments when the whole saga would replay in my head. But those moments got fewer and further between. Life's too short to live in the rearview mirror, right? I kept my eyes on the road ahead, excited about the unknowns. I leaned on my friends, those solid gold folks who stuck by me through the storm. We had some good times, shared a lot of laughs. They reminded me that no matter how rough it gets, you're not alone. There's always someone ready to pick you up, share a beer, and talk about everything or nothing at all. So, what's the moral of the story? Maybe it's that life throws curveballs, and sometimes they hit you right in the gut. But you get back up, dust yourself off, and keep swinging. Or maybe it's about trust, how it's the foundation of everything, and once it's gone, it's pretty darn hard to rebuild. In the end, this whole roller coaster ride taught me a bunch about myself. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can face just about anything and come out the other side. I also learned it's okay to not have all the answers, to take life as it comes and enjoy the ride. So, there you have it. My story of love, betrayal, and finding my feet again. It's been one heck of a journey, but hey, that's life, unpredictable, messy, but also pretty amazing. Now, I'm just cruising along, open to whatever's next on this wild road. And who knows, maybe the best is yet to come. Cheers to that. The moment I saw Alex, something shifted. Standing there, with his back to the morning sun filtering through the office blinds, he was discussing strategies with the team. His confidence was unmistakable, his voice carrying a certain enthusiasm that was hard to ignore. It was just a glance, really, but it lingered longer than it should have. I shook it off, reminding myself I was a married woman, a project manager, not some love-struck teenager. By the time we had our first one-on-one meeting over coffee to discuss the project's direction, my initial intrigue had blossomed into genuine respect for his vision. Alex talked about the project with such passion, it was contagious. You really nailed the presentation last week, Maria. It's clear you've got a solid grip on where we need to head, he said, his eyes locking with mine for a moment longer than necessary. My heart raced at the compliment, a mix of professional pride and something else, something more personal. We found ourselves staying late one evening, the office quiet except for the occasional sound of our voices and the soft tapping on our keyboards. It was supposed to be a session to finalize the project plan, but it quickly turned into something else. Between the discussions of timelines and deliverables, we shared personal stories, laughing over past work blunders and bonding over our mutual love for hiking. It felt easy, comfortable, and dangerously close to crossing a line I hadn't even realized I was approaching. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Thanks for staying late today. Couldn't have gotten the plan so polished without you. It was a simple message, professional and polite, but it sparked a flurry of exchanges. Casual at first, our texts gradually veered into the personal territory, blurring boundaries with every send but impressed. Our work dinner was the tipping point. What began as a meal to discuss project details evolved into an evening filled with laughter, shared interests, and an undeniable connection. I found myself sharing things with Alex that I hadn't even shared with Tom, my husband, in months. The guilt was there, nagging at the back of my mind, but I pushed it aside, caught up in the moment and the exhilarating feeling of being understood and admired. Walking back to my car that night, the air felt different, charged with an energy I was both excited and scared to acknowledge. I knew I was standing at the precipice of something life-changing, yet the pull towards whatever this was with Alex felt too strong to resist. The rational part of me screamed warnings, but the part of me that craved excitement and connection was louder, drowning out everything else. As I drove home, the streets empty and the city lights a blur, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was hurtling towards an unknown destination at full speed. And the truth was, part of me didn't want to stop. From the moment I stepped into the light of our kitchen, the air felt charged, different. Tom was sitting at the table, a look of concern etched across his face that I hadn't seen in a long time. You've been coming home late a lot, he started, his voice steady but laced with something that sounded like fear. Is everything okay at work? His question, so simple yet loaded, caught me off guard. I forced a smile, brushing off his concern with a rehearsed ease. Yeah, just the usual project madness. You know how it is. But even as I spoke, I could feel the weight of the lies settling in. The next day, Alex handed me a book, his fingers lingering a moment too long as they brushed against mine. "Thought you'd like this," he said, a knowing look in his eyes. The book was on architectural design, a subject we'd spent hours discussing. It felt personal, a token of the connection growing between us, hidden beneath the guise of work-related enthusiasm. When Tom found the book later, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, turning it over in his hands. Panic fluttered in my chest as I lied. "Oh, a colleague lent it to me. Said it was a good read." I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, but he didn't push further. That night, I lay awake, the gap between us and our bed feeling like a chasm. The tension broke on the night of our project's successful launch. Alex and I found ourselves alone, celebrating over drinks. The air was electric with our triumph and something more, something unspoken. When he leaned in to kiss me, it felt inevitable, like all the moments leading up to this had been a countdown to the inevitable collision of our lips. The thrill of it consumed me, drowning out the quiet voice of guilt whispering in the back of my mind. But the guilt was there, a shadow trailing behind the moments of exhilaration. It reared its head in the quiet moments, in the pauses between Alex's messages that had become my lifeline. I found myself hiding my phone from Tom, the lies building like a wall between us. Tom's voice broke through my fog of denial one evening as we sat across from each other, an ocean of unsaid words between us. "We're drifting apart," he said, his voice breaking. "I feel like I'm losing you." I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap with truths and confessions, but fear held me back. "We're fine, Tom. Just a rough patch, that's all," I said, my voice hollow, the reassurance as much for me as for him. With each day, the secret grew, a living thing between Alex and me, pulling us further into its gravity. And as it did, the life I had built with Tom, built on years of love and shared dreams, seemed to drift further away, leaving me caught between the thrill of the new and the comfort of the old, unsure of where I belonged anymore. I never thought a simple cup of coffee could feel like a grenade with the pin pulled out. But there we were, Alex and I, laughing over lattes in that cozy cafe corner, when the door chimed and my world tilted on its axis. Tom, my husband, the man I shared a life with, walked in. The look on his face when he saw us together, it was a mix of confusion, hurt, and something else I couldn't quite place. "Maria, what's going on?" His voice was calm, too calm. I scrambled for an explanation that sounded like the truth, but wasn't. "Oh, hey, we're just discussing the new project timeline. Grab a coffee, join us." The lie tasted bitter. The cafe encounter was just the beginning. A few days later, Tom confronted me with my phone in hand, his expression dark and stormy. "Who's Alex?" he asked, voice tight with barely contained anger. The screen displayed a string of texts from Alex, ones I thought I had deleted, ones that no doubt crossed lines. "He's just a colleague," I stammered, trying to downplay the obvious. "We're friends, that's all." But the look in Tom's eyes told me he didn't buy it, not for a second. Then came the ultimatum, a word I never thought would find its way into our marriage. "It's him or me, Maria. You decide." The weight of those words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I promised to end it with Alex, to cut ties and focus on us. But promises, I learned, are as fragile as glass, easily made and easily broken. The weekend away with Alex was supposed to be a secret, a hidden chapter in a book I was writing with someone else. We masked it as a work conference, an excuse dipped in deceit. But when Tom found the hotel receipts, the lie exploded in my face. "It was for a work thing, Tom. You're reading too much into this." The denial came easily, too easily, a reflex born of guilt. But Tom, ever the detective, went a step further. I discovered the GPS tracker on my car one afternoon, a silent witness to my lies. The betrayal I felt at his lack of trust was ironic, considering my own. In a moment of weakness, I confided in my friend about the affair. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, the words tasting like ash. I'm so lost. Her sympathy was a balm, but her words were a knife. You need to figure it out, Maria. You're playing with fire. Each event, each lie, built a labyrinth around me, one I couldn't navigate. With every step I took, I wandered further into the maze, losing pieces of myself and my marriage along the way. The realization hit me hard, a truth I couldn't escape. I was the architect of my own downfall, crafting a story with no happy ending in sight. The words of my friend echoed in my ears, a warning I chose to ignore. Maria, this is dangerous, she had said, her voice heavy with concern. You could lose everything. But the thrill, the forbidden excitement of being with Alex, overshadowed the voice of reason. I was torn, caught in the middle of a storm I had conjured, unable to step back or move forward. It was during a seemingly innocent moment, hands entwined under the table, that our secret began to unravel. Someone from work spotted us, and by the next day, the whispers had started. The office was abuzz, the rumor mill churning out stories faster than I could deny them. I heard Maria and Alex are a thing. Isn't she married? The questions stung, each one a reminder of the web of lies I was tangled in. Denying the rumors became a part of my daily routine, each denial a brick in the wall I was building around myself. It's not true, I'd say, forcing a laugh, trying to appear unfazed. But inside, the pressure was mounting, a constant, gnawing reminder of the reality I was trying to escape. The day Tom showed up at work for a surprise lunch was the day I realized how far I had drifted from the shore. His presence, once a source of comfort, now felt like an intrusion. I thought we could have lunch together, he said, smiling, unaware of the storm raging inside me. The panic was palpable, a thick cloud of fear and guilt. How could I sit across from him, knowing the lies that lay between us? Another work trip with Alex was the nail in the coffin, a decision made in a moment of folly. Tom's suspicion was evident in his eyes, a silent question that demanded an answer I wasn't ready to give. It's just a conference, I lied, the words tasting like ash. But the lie was thin, transparent, and we both knew it. A colleague pulled me aside one day, her words a lifeline I was too scared to grasp. Maria, be careful, she cautioned, her eyes filled with a mix of worry and disappointment. You're risking your career, your reputation. But her words, meant to pull me back from the edge, only pushed me further into the abyss. I was too far gone, too entangled in the lies and the longing. Home became a battlefield, a place of silent dinners and unspoken accusations. The tension was a living, breathing entity, filling the spaces between Tom and me, a constant reminder of the chasm that had formed. We were strangers, sharing a house but not a life, the distance between us growing with each passing day. Caught in a web of my own making, I was losing sight of who I was, who I had been before Alex walked into my life. The excitement had faded, leaving behind a trail of destruction, a life fractured by choices I couldn't undo. The warning signs were there, clear as day, but I had chosen to ignore them, blinded by a passion that was as fleeting as it was fierce. Now, I was paying the price, trapped in a maze of lies and regrets, searching for a way out that didn't exist. The moment I decided to leave Tom for Alex, I thought I was choosing true love over security. It felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying all at once. I'm going to be with Alex, I whispered to my reflection, trying on the decision like a new dress, turning it over in my mind, looking for flaws. But when I told Alex, expecting him to sweep me up in a declaration of mutual passion, his hesitation sliced through the fantasy. Maria, it's complicated. I'm not sure I can leave my situation right now, he stammered, his words a cold bucket of reality dumped over my head. The ground beneath me shifted, the future I had imagined crumbling away. The realization that I had misjudged Alex's intentions was a bitter pill to swallow. I had gambled everything on a mirage, leaving me stranded in no man's land. In desperation, I sought Tom out, hoping to find a bridge back to the life I had so recklessly abandoned. Tom, can we talk? I made a mistake, I said, my voice trembling with the weight of my regret. but the distance in his eyes told me that the chasm between us might be too wide to cross. I don't know if there's anything left to say. Maria, he replied, his voice hollow. My discovery of the GPS tracker on my car was the spark that ignited an inferno. Confronting Tom, I demanded answers, only to be faced with the evidence of my deceit laid bare. How could you not trust me? I accused, even as I knew the hypocrisy of my words. The argument that followed was a tempest, raw and unyielding. I tried to justify my actions, to make him see that my mistake didn't define me. But Tom was unmoved, his heart hardened against my pleas. The isolation that followed was suffocating. At work, colleagues who once greeted me with smiles now offered only cool nods, their conversations stopping as I approached. The whispers were a constant hum in the background, a soundtrack to my downfall. Then came the ultimatum from Alex, the final nail in the coffin of what I thought we had. We can't do this anymore, Maria. It's too risky for both of our careers, he said, his voice devoid of the warmth I had once basked in. The professional facade we now had to maintain was a stark reminder of everything I had lost. In the end, I was left to navigate the wreckage of my own making, a ship without a compass in a sea of judgment and regret. The life I had known was gone, replaced by a reality of my own creation. The path back to myself was unclear, every step heavy with the knowledge of what could have been and the harsh truths I had learned too late. The moment I stepped into the office, I could feel it, the weight of whispered judgments, the cold shoulders that turned away as I approached. My professional reputation, once sterling, was now tarnished by rumors and whispers that seemed to echo off the walls. Maria, the one who, I'd catch snippets of conversations that would cut off as soon as I came into view. The realization that my personal choices had bled into my professional life, eroding the respect and position I had worked so hard to build, was a pill too bitter to swallow. Coming home to an empty house only amplified the loneliness. The day Tom moved out, he didn't say much. The silence between us was filled with years of memories and a chasm of betrayal. The space he left behind was palpable, a void that echoed with the remnants of our life together. Every room, every piece of furniture, reminded me of what had been and what I had lost. When the divorce papers arrived, they felt like a formal acknowledgement of my downfall. Tom cited irreconcilable differences, but we both knew the truth. The legal documents didn't just signify the end of our marriage, they were a testament to the destruction my actions had wrought. The financial strain that followed was crippling. The divorce settlement heavily favored Tom, a consequence of my infidelity. I was left to navigate the murky waters of financial insecurity alone, a stark contrast to the stability we had shared. The reality of managing expenses and legal fees on a single income was a challenge I was ill-prepared for. Friends, or those I had thought were friends, sided with Tom. Their withdrawal added layers to my isolation, leaving me to face the aftermath of my choices alone. The social circle we had built together disbanded, aligning with the person they deemed the victim, while I was cast in the role of the pariah. At work, the fallout continued. I was passed over for a promotion I had been eyeing for months. The reason, though not explicitly stated, was clear. The affair had become a distraction, a mark against my professional judgment. My career, once on an upward trajectory, had hit a standstill, a reflection of the chaos my personal life had become. In the solitude of my empty home, I found myself reflecting on the choices that led me to this point. The consequences of my actions were laid bare, a harsh landscape of lost love, friendships, and professional respect. The cost of my pursuit of happiness, or what I had believed to be happiness, was higher than I could have ever imagined. And then, the final cut, Alex moved to another city for a new job, severing the last tie I had to the illusion of a future we might have shared. His departure was a quiet affair, a simple message that left no room for doubt. We were over, not just in the physical sense, but in every way that mattered. The realization that I was truly alone, forced to confront the wreckage of my own making, was a turning point. The path to rebuilding my life was uncertain, fraught with the remnants of broken relationships and a tarnished reputation. Yet, it was a path I knew I had to take. The journey toward redemption and self-forgiveness was the only way forward, a chance to start anew, not in the pursuit of happiness with another but in finding peace within myself. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but it was mine to walk, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of my downfall. The silence in my apartment was deafening, a stark contrast to the life I once led, filled with laughter, whispered secrets, and the warmth of companionship. Now, it was just me, surrounded by the ghosts of choices past, each room echoing with the loneliness that had become my constant companion. My social circle, once vibrant and inclusive, had dwindled to nothing, leaving me to face the long evenings alone. Work, too, felt like a battlefield, every achievement overshadowed by the whispers and sidelong glances of colleagues who knew too much about my personal failings. Determined to claw my way out of the hole I dug for myself, I threw myself into my job and sought solace in personal growth. Books on self-improvement and mindfulness became my new best friends, their pages offering advice on how to rebuild a life from the ashes of disaster. I started attending workshops and seminars, anything to fill the void and perhaps find a new direction for my aimless drifting. It was during one of these attempts at starting over that I ran into Tom. Our encounter was accidental, a chance meeting at a mutual friend's art exhibit. He was polite, his greeting cordial, but his eyes were distant, a clear sign that he had moved on from the storm we had weathered together. The cold politeness of his demeanor was a sharp reminder of all that had been lost. His indifference stung, a tangible sign of the emotional chasm that now lay between us. The sight of him, so composed and distant, filled me with a deep, gnawing regret. Memories of our life together played in my mind, a montage of moments both mundane and profound, now tinted with the gray hue of loss. I had hoped for a flicker of warmth, a sign that not all was lost between us, but faced with his polite detachment, I realized the full extent of the damage my actions had caused. In the aftermath of our encounter, a resolution began to take shape within me. I accepted full responsibility for the choices that led me here, to this moment of profound isolation and regret. The journey to forgiveness, both seeking it and offering it to myself, was fraught with difficulty, but I understood that it was the only way forward. I vowed to learn from my mistakes, to grow beyond the person who had made them, and to build a future that was defined not by regret, but by the lessons learned from it. The new normal that unfolded was one of quiet reflection and slow rebuilding. My social circle may have been irrevocably changed, but I found solace in new friendships, ones that were built on the foundation of who I was becoming, not who I had been. My professional life, too, began to show signs of recovery, as I proved through my actions and dedication that I was more than the sum of my past mistakes. The road ahead was not easy, marked by moments of doubt in the lingering shadows of what had been. Yet, with each step forward, I found strength in my resolve to become a better version of myself, one who faced the consequences of her actions with grace and the determination to emerge stronger. The affair and its aftermath were painful lessons in the consequences of our choices, but they were also a catalyst for change, pushing me towards a future where I could look back on this chapter not with endless regret, but with the understanding that from great mistakes come profound opportunities. This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, one of your favorite channels on YouTube, and we're back at you this week with another great story. You can see the title right on your screen. Cheating girlfriend and her parents went psycho after I ghosted her. Now let's get into this story and see what it's all about. He starts out and he says, "Take this post for what it's worth. I think it will be helpful for some and to others just an entertaining read." This saga all started about 9 years ago when I was 24 and my then girlfriend was 22. For this post, I'll refer to my girlfriend as Melissa and to myself as Nigel. At the time, I had been working for about 2 years as an account manager for a well-known tech company. I moved to the city for this job, and while I loved the work and was making phenomenal money, I was lost and very lonely. Being so far away from friends and family and in a strange place, I threw myself into my job. I used dating apps and went out on occasion to bars, but only had a few dates, nothing serious. Then one day I was out at a local place by myself listening to a band and noticed Melissa. She walked into the bar and sat down on one of the stools. I watched her from a table thinking, this pretty girl has to be there waiting for someone. I then saw her place an order with the bartender. When she got her drink, she turned to watch the band. I thought to myself, this girl is all alone. As luck or unluck would have it, a stool opened up right beside her and I headed over there to claim it. I asked her if the seat was taken. She replied no, it was all mine. When the band took a break, she and I started talking and immediately bonded. She had recently moved to the city for work and was feeling kind of lost too. From that night on, things moved quickly for us. We had our first date that very weekend and officially became an exclusive couple a week later. I was head over heels in love, and again in this story I have to tell the OP, no, you were not head over heels in love after just a week of dating. You were in lust, my friend. I have to admit back then I felt like she was an angel sent to fill the deep empty void in my life. After about a month, she basically started living at my place, even though she still had a small apartment of her own. A few months later her lease came up and instead of renewing it, I asked her to move in with me after just 5.5 months of dating. Big mistake there, moving in just after 5.5 months. What are you thinking? I really thought I had found the one. So this guy was just totally smitten, you can see that. My parents like Melissa. While her parents gave me bad vibes, her dad is a high school football coach and gym teacher. He initially hardly spoke to me and barely made eye contact. In fact, when we met I extended my hand but he just turned away. I got the sense the guy didn't like me. Her mom was just obnoxious. She's one of those loud, overbearing people who are really unpleasant to be around. You know the type. When we announced we were moving in together, my parents expressed their displeasure, saying it was too soon. Well, you should have listened to your parents. Her parents blew a gasket until they found out I would be paying 75% of the rent and expenses, including food. They seemed okay with it, though not completely happy. As time went on, my relationship with Melissa got better and better. Things were going so well that I started thinking about when I would pop the question. Even her wacky parents started treating me with respect and as part of the family, especially after I got a big promotion and no longer required Melissa to pay anything to live with me. Another big mistake. I don't care what she's earning. You've got to make her contribute. All of a sudden, they saw me as future son-in-law material and started visiting us a few times each month, he says, unfortunately. Melissa's dad, who treated me like dirt before, started treating me like his best friend after I took him to several professional sports games and we sat and ate in my company's luxury box. Even though his sentiment changed, I never trusted the guy. I just had a bad feeling about him. He seemed to be a powder keg of rage, just waiting to explode at any minute. More about this later. So everything for Melissa and I was going great until around the 9th month of our cohabitation. It was then I started to notice a few subtle changes that immediately sparked my suspicion. The first was one day when I walked up on her while she was texting and she nearly jumped out of her skin and hid her phone away from my view. Her excuse for acting like that was she claimed I startled her. Well, that's your first red flag. The next was just the sheer volume of texts she was getting. When I questioned this, she said it was just from her work colleagues. I noticed right after that the number of texts she was getting nearly stopped. Only to find out later it was because she silenced the alerts. Red flag number 2. Then she started taking her phone to bed with her and putting it on her nightstand instead of on the charger alongside my phone on our dresser. Red flag number 3. Taking that phone and keeping it close to her even when she's sleeping. I knew at that point something was going on and her phone held all the answers. One night she fell asleep and left her bedside lamp on. I got up and went around to her side to turn it off. She was sound asleep, so I thought this would be my chance to snoop. I picked up her phone and entered the code, but she had changed it. Red flag number 4. I'm assuming previously he knew what her passcode was. Now all of a sudden out of the blue she changed it and didn't advise him. That's a definite red flag. I then tried holding the phone in front of her face to open it, but since her eyes were closed the facial recognition didn't work. I hit a dead end, but knew her changing her password without telling me was another sign she was hiding something. Then that Saturday, through an odd twist of fate, I was able to get into her phone. She and I were sitting at the kitchen table and I noticed she left her phone in the living room on top of the TV. Apparently her mom had been trying to call her, but since she had the phone silenced we didn't hear it. Her mom then called me and I handed Melissa my phone to talk to her. The two of them started talking about some nonsense I can't remember, but they were heavy into conversation. Just before her mom called, Melissa was about to head out to the store to grab a few things for our lunch. I think she forgot she was using my phone and said to me she was going to run out to the store. I said okay and she continued talking to her mother as she left the apartment, leaving me there alone with her phone. As soon as she got outside I locked the door behind her and went to retrieve her phone, hoping the auto lock hadn't kicked in. Thankfully it didn't and I was able to get right in. What I found was a string of text messages between her and a person listed as Sharon Work. This is how she had all of her coworkers labeled in her phone, so she obviously did this as a decoy. I had never heard her speak of this Sharon before, and when I read the messages I found out that Sharon was actually a guy from her office. I'll call him Rob. I had never met Rob before, but found out later he was 39 years old and he and his wife had just entered into an open marriage. Their first text dated back a little over 2 weeks prior, which just so happened to coincide with when her suspicious behavior began. The text indicated the first time they were together physically happened just that past Monday. Curiously, Melissa told me she went to the walk-in clinic after work on Monday for a burning urethra. This was all a huge lie, as she spent that time with her lover boy Rob. When she came home she told me she had been diagnosed with a UTI, a urinary tract infection, and we'd have to abstain for a while until she got rid of it. Looking back now I have to admit the UTI excuse was brilliant, as it gave her an alibi for coming home late and an excuse for not having sex with me. I wanted nothing more than to confront her when she got back and throw her cheating self out, but I played it cool and contemplated my next move. What I eventually decided to do was to secretly abandon her without explanation. I already paid the 10th month of the 12-month apartment lease and only had 2 months remaining, with the final month being free of charge as part of the promotion I got when I renewed the lease. I really lucked out here. My plan was to get another place, and one day, while she was at work, I would move all my stuff to my new place and ghost her, and that's what I did. I got a new apartment 25 minutes away and arranged for a local moving franchise to move all my stuff out to my new place. The only furniture I left her was the spare bed and mattress. The day I moved out, I went to the office and gave them my cancellation notice. I paid for the month 11 and explained to the leasing agent that I had already moved out, but my former girlfriend would likely be staying there through the end of the lease term. The leasing agent suggested we do a walkthrough together so she could take pictures of the current condition of the apartment in the event that anything was damaged during the final months of the lease. I agreed, and we did just that. That was probably pretty smart. As it so happened, the day I moved out, Melissa and Rob had another rendezvous planned. She texted me in the afternoon stating that she had to work over and would be home about 90 minutes late. She said she would get takeout from our favorite place and bring it home for us. I said okay and gave her my order, knowing I wouldn't be there. As expected, at around 7 o'clock, she started blowing up my phone. First with multiple missed calls followed by a barrage of texts asking what was going on. Finally, after a couple hours of making her sweat, I called her. She answered crying and asked me what was going on. I told her that I knew all about Rob and that we were done. She was silent on the other end as I explained I had cancelled the lease and she could live there through the end of the term. She then spoke up through tears saying she could explain everything and that it's not what it seems. I told her to save it and to not make a fool of herself. She kept going on saying she was sorry for the misunderstanding and begging me, but at that point I had heard enough and hung up. The rest of the night she kept calling and texting, but I took a page out of her playbook and silenced my phone. I slept like a baby that night. The next morning I woke up and my voicemail box was full, so I deleted all her messages and then blocked her number, as having a full voicemail is a violation of company policy. As an account manager, I work mostly from the road, so she couldn't ambush me at the office. So now she had no way of reaching me since she didn't know where I was staying. I thought to myself, wow, I played this like a pro and got out of this bad situation with minimal damage. Well, I soon found out I wasn't completely rid of her. Remember her wacky parents? They still weren't done with me. A few weeks after I ghosted Melissa, I signed into Facebook for the first time in weeks, and to my surprise I saw numerous posts by Melissa's mom and replies from some of her friends. Her mom made several posts saying I was mentally abusive to her daughter, gave her an STD, and then abandoned her. Yes, I'm serious, folks, this woman is so ignorant. She actually posted on the internet that her daughter had contracted an STD. The first thing I did after reading this was get tested myself, and thankfully the results came back all clear. Phew, he says, thank God for that. I was so angry about the post I decided to sue Melissa's mom. I went to an attorney recommended by one of my coworkers and he drafted a demand letter to Melissa's mom ordering her to stop making false claims against me and to immediately remove all current postings, as I would be suing her for libel and slander. The attorney advised me to follow through with suing her even if she complied. The same evening of the day that Melissa's mom received the letter from my attorney, I was confronted by Melissa's father outside of my apartment building. Now listen to this. He says I don't know how he found out where I lived, but he did. He approached me from the back as I was walking up to the security doors at the front of the building. I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw it was him. Before I could do or say anything, he walked right over to me and grabbed me around the collar and neck and starts lifting me, saying, "You son of a." I told him, hey, what are you doing? You're choking me. I then went into full survival mode. I jerked back away from him and with my right arm swung as hard as I could. My right fist connected directly with the side of his nose. I had never hit anything or anyone that hard before, and when I did I heard a loud crack. He immediately dropped to the ground, stumbling off, holding his bleeding nose and screaming in agony. I started towards him to help, but then thought I'd better not and instead called the police, as this lunatic would be the type to falsely accuse me. I called the police, told them everything that happened, and they filed a report. I then told them my building has a security camera and I would call the office tomorrow to have them provide the tape. I called and they provided me with a 6-minute clip of the time in question. The video clip and sound clearly showed Melissa's dad ambushed me, grabbed me by the neck and lifted me off the ground before I swung. After reviewing the footage, the investigating officer asked if I wanted to press charges. Based on what he saw in the tape, he recommended I do so. So I did and obtained a temporary restraining order. Since her parents live in a different jurisdiction, the officer said they would be back in touch in a few days with an update. Well, 2 days later I got a call from my attorney. He informed me that he had been contacted by an attorney representing Melissa's parents. Apparently they had received a letter from my attorney and her dad had been contacted by the local police. My attorney said their attorney told him they were willing to do anything to resolve these matters with me, as they didn't want to be sued and her father didn't want a criminal record. Though I wanted nothing more for them to sweat and suffer a little, in the end I agreed not to sue them and to drop the charges against her father. In exchange they both agreed to a full written confession of guilt for both the libel/slander and for the unprovoked attack. Her mother also was ordered to post a statement on her Facebook account for 6 months explaining that all the previous statements she made about me were false. Like I said, I really would have liked to make both of these maggots suffer, but I was just glad to finally be done with this family. But unfortunately, the fun didn't stop there. About 6 months later, I was out at a bar with several of my coworkers when I ran into a woman who used to work with Melissa. I always liked this woman as she seemed genuine. In our conversation, she proceeded to let me know that Melissa is pregnant and was probably close to her due date now. She then told me it was known that Melissa and Rob had a thing, and they told people in the office they both were in open relationships. She said about a month or so after I broke up with Melissa, Rob left the company, and she later heard he divorced his wife. Now listen to this. She said the rumor is that Rob's wife contracted HSV-2, that's herpes, through one of her open marriage partners and gave it to Rob, who then gave it to Melissa. See what promiscuity without protection gets you? I again thank God I found out about this and broke up with her before she infected me, but that wasn't everything. She said Melissa had told everyone that the baby she's carrying is mine, and that after it's born she hoped we can reconcile. He says what the? There's no way the baby was mine based on the dates, so I immediately contacted my attorney and had him send a cease and desist letter to her. Later I found out through the same former coworker of Melissa that she had given birth to a little boy, and the poor kid acquired HSV-2 during birth from his mother and almost didn't survive. Apparently the virus is very dangerous to infants. That poor kid. While I despise that entire family, I feel really bad for that baby being born into the world with an incurable STD he got from his mother. Poor kid, I hope he grows up and lives a healthy and successful life. He says, well, that's my nightmare relationship story. As I said, I'm not looking for anything, I just wanted to share my story for what it's worth. May you live well, Nigel. So that's the end of his story, and he doesn't have any updates, but he did get a number of replies to his post, and in some of the replies he responded to some questions. So let's take a look at those now, but before we do, I want to remind you, if you like what you've heard so far, be sure to hit that like button. That will make sure this video gets seen by people all over the planet. So now let's take a look at some of those questions he got and his replies back to the people that responded to him. The first one's from a guy. He says, have you had any contact with Melissa since this happened? The OP says, thankfully I haven't. The last time we communicated was 7+ years ago. I don't know what happened to her or her parents. They deleted all their social media accounts after our fiasco. I wish them well, especially the child who was born into that horrible family with a terrible disease. And I have to agree with this guy, I didn't realize that this herpes virus could be so deadly to newborns, but I looked it up after reading this story and it's just a terrible condition, and I do feel sorry for that kid. I don't know the kid, of course, but I feel really bad for a kid that would be born into the world like that, acquiring herpes from his mother, and that's something he's going to have for the rest of his life. So I too wish this young kid nothing but the best, and I hope he has a very prosperous and successful and happy life. Next we got another question from a guy. He says, why didn't you drop the charges against her old man? If that were me, I would have done everything I could have to put that idiot in jail. The OP responds, and he says, I hear you, but you have to understand, I just wanted to be done with them and to get my life back on track. I accomplished that, and I'm happy with the outcome and how I handled things. I sure learned some valuable lessons. When I look back at this, he said that her dad was a high school football coach. I bet her dad was used to going up to his players and grabbing them by the shoulder pads and maybe lifting them off the ground. So I think he probably approached the OP that way when he confronted him outside of his apartment building, not expecting that the OP was going to react in a defensive posture and then just slug him, which he should have, because that's totally self-defense in that case. Like I've said in all my videos, I'm totally against violence, but in the case of self-defense, I think it's absolutely warranted. And then finally, a question from a woman. Now listen to what she says. She says, what's your relationship status now? Are you married or seeing anyone currently? She says, PS. I'm available, wink wink. The OP responds and says, I'm not married and don't ever intend to, but I've been seeing a great woman for the past 3 years and would like to build a family with her someday. She's younger, so we've still got time. And that's a good point that the OP makes. He wants to go out and build a family with this woman, but as he says here, he's never getting married. So guys, remember that you can go out and build a family with a woman. Have children with her, you don't have to get married. And now with that, I want to cover what I think are the morals of this story. And there were a ton of them. The first one: never rush into a relationship. These situations rarely turn out well. And you see what happened to this guy. What did he do? He moved this woman into his apartment after 5.5 months and then started paying all of her bills. Huge mistake. Number 2, if her parents are crazy, there's a chance she could be as well. And I would say there's a very good chance she could be as well. And the old saying about never sticking urine crazy. That applies here. Number 3, always keep your cool and never employ violence unless it is a case of self-defense like I just said. Number 4, ghosting is by far and away the best way to break up with the cheater. Because guess what, you don't have to deal with all the nonsense and all the lies they're going to try to spin to you. And all the begging and the pleading. Nope, you just walk away clean. Yeah, you're still going to be broken up inside, but you're going to get over it much faster because guess what, you took back control of the situation. And finally, living a great life is the best possible revenge. I'm sure this Melissa has followed this Nigel's life over time, and she's probably just beating herself up saying he was mine and I blew it. I let him get away. He's the one that got away. He's living a great life now and my life is absolutely miserable. He's totally forgotten about me. Meanwhile, I'm thinking about him every day. I guarantee that's what's going on with her. So those are my thoughts, people. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Have you ever gone through something like this? Tell us about it in the comments. Also be sure to like this video. Share it with your friends and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you on the... It was getting dark outside. An autumn, cold evening was approaching. Mia, where were you rushing off to again? Asked Chad, noticing his wife eating on the go and constantly glancing at her watch. My friend Julia asked me to stop by. Remember, I told you we lived together in the orphanage, asked for help with some housework. After a difficult surgery I couldn't refuse. Mia replied, looking at her husband imploringly. Mia, are you her servant? I don't understand you, Chad retorted. Darling, I want to be gone long. I'll be back soon, Mia said, before running out of the house a few minutes later. Chad was the son of a general. His parents were against their son marrying Mia, an orphan from the orphanage. They had long predicted a career in diplomacy for Chad, and dreamed of him marrying Milena, the daughter of a well-known businessman in town. Before meeting Mia, Chad was not averse to marrying Milena for business, as his father put it. However, Chad wanted to pursue a career in business, not diplomacy. Mr. Rendon, Milena's father, persuaded him to do so. Chad received a brilliant education abroad, had a sharp mind and an excellent memory. Mr. Rendon took it upon himself to hone the knowledge of his future son-in-law in practice, teaching him the basics and pitfalls of business. The man not only gave instructions, but also invested his own money in a new joint project with Chad, and so the business began to grow. Shopping centers opened one after another, and profits grew, settling in the pockets of the businessman. Well, son-in-law, soon we'll be related not only financially, but also by blood, Mr. Rendon liked to say, smiling contentedly. He considered Chad the perfect husband for his spoiled daughter Milena, but there was no love between the young couple. Well, it's okay, daughter. Only losers came up with the fairy tale of love and are fooling themselves with it. Chad is a great match for you, and as for love, you're both young, beautiful, and passionate. What can't be cured must be endured. However, Mr. Rendon's predictions were not meant to come true. Everything was turned upside down by Chad's chance encounter with a provincial girl named Mia at the cinema. She worked at a factory and rented a small room in a communal apartment. Love ignited in Chad's heart suddenly, even at the first meeting. What made Mia so attractive to him? Perhaps it was her kindness, sincerity, meekness, modesty and tenderness, all the things that were completely absent in Milena. They had only been seeing each other for a week, but Chad, falling in love like a boy, realized that he couldn't live without Mia. The feeling was mutual. Mia was sure that she had met the man of her dreams, the one she constantly read about in romance novels. And now it had happened in real life. After several meetings, Chad proposed to Mia without telling his parents. When his parents found out what had happened, they were emotionally shocked. "Are you insane?" they screamed at him. "You are going to exchange Milena for this orphan without family. How will we face Mr. Rendon? He invested so much in you. Marrying this pauper is a disaster for everything, both business and normal life." But despite his parents' desperate objections, Chad did not cancel his decision to marry Mia. His love for her was 1,000 times stronger than his parents' attacks. Mr. Rendon reassured Chad's parents, saying, "Come on, don't be silly. He'll get married and then get divorced." I bet he dreamed of a beautiful future for his daughter and would do everything to reunite Chad and Milena again. No guests attended Mia and Chad's wedding. Chad's parents barely crossed the threshold of the registry office and did not stay there for more than 10 minutes. But the young couple was happy together, despite everything. Chad rented a spacious apartment in a new building, and life flowed calmly and joyfully, like a family. Chad and Mia seemed to dissolve into each other and were already thinking about having a child. The peaceful idyll of Mia was suddenly interrupted by a phone call. "Mia, hello. You don't recognize me. I am Scott, your brother. I returned from prison 3 days ago." Mia's heart sank. She knew how much Chad's relatives hated her, and she was afraid to reveal the whole truth about her family, saying only that she lived in an orphanage. Mia hid that her mother was in prison for causing serious bodily harm to her stepfather, and that she died there. Mia also did not reveal that her brother was also in prison for robbery. The girl was sure that if Chad's relatives knew about this, they would never have allowed her to marry Chad and be happy. And now this call from the past. "Mia, why are you silent? Maybe you're not happy. I heard you married a millionaire. You probably have a lot of money. Can't you share with your own brother? I need a little bit. I also need a corner to live for a short time. I'll look around and return the money right away." Mia did not dare to refuse her brother and quietly said, "I'll think about how to help you." She and Chad got married. She left her job at the factory at her husband's request. Instead of a salary, Mia now received money from her husband on a personal card. She had been supporting her wayward brother Scott with this money for over a month. She even rented a small apartment in an old building for him. "What's wrong, Mia? Can't you buy new dresses for yourself?" Chad asked her, noticing that his wife was not updating her wardrobe at all. "Why spend so much right away? I have a lot of normal clothes." Mia evasively replied. And Chad smiled. "You're right, Mia. You're beautiful in any clothes." The only thing that worried Chad was his wife's frequent departures from home, especially in the last month, and today she had reason to leave the house again because her friend Julia asked for help. Chad knew Mia to be a kind and compassionate person who cared about the troubles of others, but he never expected her to go to such lengths. In fact, once again, Mia had gone to great lengths to help her brother by buying him groceries. She knew that if she gave him money, he would spend it on alcohol. Mia felt heavy-hearted. She knew her husband did not approve of her absences, and she was risking losing him. She tried to push away the negative thoughts, but they kept returning with renewed strength. Finally, Mia promised herself that she would tell her husband about her strange trips the next day. Little did she know, Milena's relatives did not accept Chad's decision to live with Mia. In fact, Mr. Rendon was hatching a cunning plan against Mia. He wanted to frame her for infidelity and thereby cause a divorce between Chad and Mia. Mr. Rendon's driver, Paul, accidentally saw Mia on the street with an unknown man. Just in case, he took a couple of photos and reported everything to his boss. "Well done, Paul. Excellent. You deserve a bonus from me," rejoiced Mr. Rendon. "I am lucky. I don't even have to come up with anything. The fish itself swam into the nets. Paul, work a little more as a private detective. Watch Mia carefully. Where does she go when she goes out on the street? Maybe she's visiting someone. The driver, of course, was happy to earn extra money and immediately agreed. That fateful evening, Paul followed Mia and recorded the address of the house and apartment. He passed this information on to his boss. Thank you, Mr. Rendon said, even more pleased. The next day, as soon as Chad entered the office, Mr. Rendon told him everything. Take a look at who your wife is spending time with, Mr. Rendon sneered. I think it's just a coincidence, nothing more, Chad replied calmly. Don't think about it. Just check it out for yourself. I have the address, said Mr. Rendon, handing Chad a piece of paper. Chad refused to believe what was happening. He had no doubts about his wife's fidelity. However, the words of his failed father-in-law became a thorn in his heart. The dull pain in his chest didn't go away for several days. Finally, Chad decided to secretly go to the specified address without telling Mia. On the day Mia decided to tell Chad the truth, he did not come home from work on time. Mia, I'll be delayed for a little while today. I have a lot of work to do. Yes, of course, dear. And I'll go to the store. Do you remember? You complained about my clothes. So I'll take a walk and have a look, Mia said. Again, Chad was completely confused. He did not believe the photos or the words, as they could all be fake. Of course, he had to see everything with his own eyes. After some time, Chad disguised himself as a pizza delivery man and went to the specified address. Who is it? Asked a rough male voice. Pizza delivery. Please open up, I didn't order anything. Please open up. Then you'll make a note of the refusal. The door creaked open. At the doorsteps stood a young man with an unkempt appearance and emanating the smell of alcohol. Chad entered the room, where the man shouted, "What do you think you're doing?" Chad paid him no attention. Instead, he saw the girl standing by the window. She turned around. Mia, how could you? I am sorry, 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 I am sorry. Chad, I'll explain everything. Please stay here, begged the girl. However, Chad just shook his head and rushed down the stairs onto the street. Something unimaginable was happening in his soul. He felt like life was over. The overwhelming emotions almost caused him to have an accident. An hour later, Mia came home and tearfully begged her husband to listen to her. She said that Scott was her own brother, but Chad didn't believe a single word. He decided to end his marriage once and for all, and break up with Mia completely. Although he loved his wife, he was ready to forgive everything except infidelity. Get your suitcase and leave. I'll announce the divorce, Chad said in a cold, unfamiliar voice. Mia quickly threw a few things into the suitcase and slowly walked away. Her body didn't obey, and her legs became like cotton wool. Behind her, she heard the sound of a door slamming shut behind her. The girl sat down on a bench, hugged her head with her hands, and burst into tears. A phone call brought her back to reality. It's Chad. Chad, he's changed his mind. Mia cried out. But unfortunately, it wasn't him. It was her friend, Julia. Hey, Mia, how are you? Julia cheerfully chattered. Mia couldn't take it and cried even harder into the phone. Hey, are you home? I'll be there in 10 minutes. Since childhood, Mia always shared her most intimate emotional experiences with Julia. This time was no exception. Yes, you messed up everything, and your little brother, that scoundrel, got involved. Mia, don't beat yourself up like this. Maybe everything will be okay. Chad must understand that there was no infidelity. If you have nowhere to live now, move in with me. I live alone. The apartment is small, but cozy. Julia kept talking and speaking with her inherent optimism, trying to lift Mia's spirits. But Mia refused to accept what had happened. She didn't lose hope and waited for her beloved. She was sure that Chad would come for her and take her back. Naively, almost childishly, but the girl believed with all her heart in the fairy tale she had invented. Days passed one by one, and with each day, Mia's financial situation worsened. Even small expenses seemed catastrophic as the remnants of the money given to her by Chad melted away. "Julia, I need to find a job," Mia said, realizing that waiting for her lost happiness wouldn't fill her stomach. "Yes," Julia replied. "I agree, my friend. We can't go on like this for much longer." Julia worked as a nurse in a hospital, but her salary was barely enough to pay for their apartment and groceries. Meanwhile, Mia wandered around the city searching for work, receiving rejection after rejection. She was particularly hurt when her former factory turned her away after the HR manager found out that she was no longer the wife of a millionaire. Desperate, Mia sat down on a bench in the park and watched the passers-by with tearful eyes. A gray-haired man of respectable age approached her and asked, "Miss, are you okay?" Mia silently nodded and told the first person she met that she really needed a job. "If you like, come to our community with me. I heard from our concierge that they need a janitor. Do you agree?" Yes, of course. As a janitor, Mia worked tirelessly. Within a few days, she rubbed large blisters, but it didn't bother her. At least she had her own piece of bread and wouldn't be a burden on Julia. But one day, Mia suddenly felt sick, dizzy, and barely made it to the bench. After a few seconds, the malaise went away and Mia returned to work. In the evening, the short attacks repeated. "Dear, something's not right. Are you pregnant, perhaps?" Julia suspected trouble. Mia was horrified at the thought, but soon her fears were confirmed. "Physically, you probably can't work anymore," Julia sighed. Even she, an optimist in life, was upset. Where could they get the money to support the child? However, she tried not to show her gloomy mood to her friend. Mia was thinking about something else entirely. "I need to tell Chad about the baby. He'll find out and be happy, and we'll be together again." Julia seemed to read her mind. "Why should you be the only one carrying this burden? The child has a father, and he should also be involved in its life." "I agree, Julia. I just need to see Chad. Everything will be the same as before." But Chad's mobile phone had not been answered since their breakup. So Mia mustered up the courage and went to his parents' house to find out where Chad could be found. Chad's mother opened the door and immediately attacked Mia, not letting her say a word. "How dare you come here, you ungrateful girl? You deceived my son. What more do you want?" Mia was stunned by the greeting, but found the strength to respond. "I need to talk to Chad and tell him he will be a father, and you will be a grandmother." "What?" The woman turned purple, her voice trembling with indignation. "Tell your lover. You have the child. Then deal with him yourself." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes, and she could barely hold them back. "Anyway, if you came here, take this." Chad's mother handed Mia a few sheets of fine paper. "What's this?" Mia asked, confused. "Divorce papers. You won't have to go to court," the woman replied indifferently. "Also, Chad will soon marry a girl who is truly worthy of him. So don't come here anymore." Mia didn't remember how she made it to Julia's house. Everything was a blur. Today, she buried her last chance for a happy life. All that was left was a ridiculous existence. "What are you talking about, Mia? What ridiculous existence?" Julia encouraged her friend. "But money, what will we live on?" Mia worried. "As a single mother, the state will pay you, and I work. Maybe I'll take on 2 jobs. We'll live. We'll raise the baby. No worse than others." Julia supported her friend as best she could. In reality, she didn't believe her own words, and was no less worried than Mia. But it was Julia's support that gave Mia the strength not to fall into depression. Despite her friend's persistent urging to give up work, Mia worked as a janitor until almost the very end of her pregnancy. On New Year's Eve, she gave birth to a daughter, whom the friends decided to name Sarah. Mia and Julia adored the little girl, but it was hard to provide for herself and her child. One day, there was a knock on the door, and Scott was standing on the doorstep. "Hi. Forgive me. I know you think I'm a monster because of me. You lost your husband. But people change, and I've changed for the better. You know, I'm not rich at all, but I'll help as much as I can." Mia couldn't refuse his help, and she had no choice. Thus, 3 years passed. They were difficult, but at the same time, happy for Julia and Mia. They raised Sarah together and tried to deal with life's troubles together. Scott often came to visit them and helped as much as he could. Mia forgave him a long time ago. One day, Scott was walking on a crosswalk and intended to go to Mia and Julia's house. Suddenly, he heard the screech of brakes, and a car stopped just centimeters away from him. "Excuse me. Are you all right?" "Thank God. For the first time in my life, I did not notice a pedestrian," said a frightened man approaching Scott. "Didn't you see me? Did you forget your eyes at home?" Scott grumbled, dissatisfied. He felt like he had seen the face of this driver before, but he couldn't remember where. "Consider it so. I can compensate you for moral damage," said the man staring at the stranger. Suddenly, he realized that it was the same man he saw at the apartment with Mia. "Do you know Mia?" he asked loudly. "Of course I do. I'm her brother. You shouldn't have left Mia. You ruined her life for no reason." "Ruined her life?" "Yes, that's right, I did. And not just for her, but for myself as well." Memories flooded Chad. He had met Mia, fallen in love, against his parents' wishes, broken up because of a ridiculous incident, and regretted it ever since. His marriage to Milena didn't work out. Milena preferred a reckless lifestyle, spending her father's and husband's money. There was not a drop of love in his marriage, and after 6 months, despite her father's pleas, they divorced. Chad was afraid to admit to himself that he couldn't forget Mia. He had driven her away, but love cannot be driven out of the heart. It still belonged to Mia. He didn't have the courage to admit his guilt for all these years. He was guilty of not listening to Mia, and not giving her a chance to explain everything. Guilty of not meeting with her when Mia asked for it. He was guilty of not looking for Mia all these years, although not a day went by without him thinking about her. What is this? Late remorse? Probably. What if it's still possible to get her back? I will definitely do it. Now? When if not now, Chad thought. He felt like he was hit by an electric shock. "Scott, tell me, where does Mia live? Please. I really need to see her. Where have you been before?" When Mia and Julia were freezing and hungry in a cold apartment. When Mia, pregnant, spent all day cleaning the yard. "Yeah, you were enjoying life with your millions," said Scott angrily. Chad, taken aback, replied, "I didn't know anything." But Scott couldn't calm down. "You didn't know anything? Oh yeah, that's indeed a good excuse. But maybe you didn't want to know." "Give me the address, please," asked Chad. He was in such a state of emotion that he did not notice Scott's insulting taunts. Calming down a little, Scott scribbled it on paper. "Take it. Perhaps not everything is lost for you yet." Chad ran up the stairs to Julia's apartment. However, the girl responded shortly to his heart-wrenching monologue. "Don't break the drama in 2 acts in front of me. You hurt Mia, hurt her badly. So it's up to her to decide whether you should be in her life or not. By the way, she should be back from work right now." At that moment, the door opened and Mia, emaciated and growing up, entered the apartment. Chad couldn't take his eyes off her. The same bottomless, infinitely familiar eyes, fragile shoulders, tender hands, Mia, his Mia. All the prepared speeches flew out of Chad's head and he could only whisper softly, "Forgive me." He looked into her eyes and understood. No, this is not the end. This is the beginning of something important and new in their